Back in 1935, the American avant-garde poet Gertrude Stein stood right about here to have her picture taken in order to document her visit to the Edgar Allan Poe Museum in Richmond. She's just one of many creative writers, filmmakers, and visual artists who've stopped by the Poe Museum in search of inspiration over the 101 years since it's been open. And one of them in particular that we'd like to talk about tonight has left a lasting mark on the horror genre. And he's even written a TV show inspired by a visit he made right here as a teenager. It's called The Following. And that'll be the subject of tonight's installment of the Curator's Crypt. The Following premiered on January 21st, 2013 on Fox. I mention the date because it was just 2 days after Edgar Allan Poe's birthday, so if they'd scheduled the premiere just a couple days earlier, it would have been a great tie-in with our annual Poe birthday bash. Regardless of that, the story centers on a college professor here in Richmond, Virginia, named Joe Carroll, played by James Purefoy. And he's obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe. So what happens when you're an English professor obsessed with Poe? You become a serial killer. And in this case, he leads a band of serial killers, a following, if you will, to go around committing Edgar Allan Poe-inspired crimes. But he gets captured by an FBI agent named Ryan Hardy, who's played by Kevin Bacon. So that's your 1 degree of separation between Poe and Kevin Bacon. But naturally, The Following breaks Joe Carroll out of prison, and he's not too happy. So the whole series is sort of a cat and mouse game between Joe and Ryan. And Ryan naturally has a bad heart because Joe stabbed him in the chest, and he took that kind of personally. Maybe that's a reference to the Telltale Heart. Well, this following of serial killers commit sort of Poe-inspired crimes. They wear Poe masks sometimes. They scrawled "Nevermore" on the wall in blood at their crime scenes. They leave behind Poe masks sometimes. There's actually a guy who shows up at Ryan's office, and as he's dying, he's saying, "Lord, help my poor soul, Lord, help my poor soul," a reference to Edgar Allan Poe's last words. And one of the best things about the show is that anybody could be a member of The Following. It turns out Joe's ex-wife's nanny is one of the serial killers. Ryan's neighbor is one of the serial killers. They're just popping up everywhere, so you never know where they're coming from. And that's part of the mystery behind it. There's also another mystery. Even from the very beginning, The Following is always saying, this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning. They're always implying there's something great to come. And you have to wait through the whole first season. When you get to the final episode of the last season, you find out the master plan behind it all is Joe wants to write a book. So he sort of needed to lead a band of serial killers and go on a big murder spree so he'd have inspiration to write a book. So I wonder if that's what he was teaching his students in his English classes about if you want to get inspired, you need to go on a killing spree. I don't know. But that was the big finale. And of course, it lasted 2 more seasons, but after the first season, they dropped a lot of the Poe references. So people stopped watching and the ratings gradually went down. And I stopped watching after they dropped all the Poe references. One more thing that's interesting about this is it's created by Kevin Williamson, who's kind of a horror icon because he wrote Scream, the movie that kicked off the whole Scream franchise. He wrote other installments and also produced them, in addition to writing Teaching Mrs. Tingle and The Faculty and I Know What You Did Last Summer, in addition to creating TV series like Vampire Diaries and, unfortunately, Dawson's Creek. So he's left a wide-ranging impact on the horror genre and also on the teen romance genre, but more importantly on the horror genre. And it might have something to do with Edgar Allan Poe. When they were launching The Following, he did an interview for Entertainment Weekly, and he told the reporter, "When I was growing up, my mom and dad took me to the Poe Museum in Richmond, Virginia. It was a little house downtown, and the raven was written on the walls. You had to move from room to read the whole story. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world." So he claimed that the Poe Museum inspired him to create this new TV series set in Richmond, Virginia, and all about the inspiration of Edgar Allan Poe. Unfortunately, it wasn't filmed here, but at least it was set here. And we like to imagine maybe visiting the Poe Museum inspired some of his other great works. Maybe a little bit of the Scream franchise was inspired by that teenage visit to the Poe Museum. But over the years, a lot of creatives, from H.P. Lovecraft and Gertrude Stein to Salvador Dali and Vincent Price, had visited the Poe Museum to find inspiration of their own. In fact, after his visit, Salvador Dali said that Poe's specter drove up from Richmond to visit him and helped him write his autobiography, The Secret Life of Salvador Dali. So how is the Poe Museum going to influence you? Why don't you pay us a visit and find out? And since this is the Curator's Crypt, I want to show you a few pieces related to The Following. This is a bag of promotional materials, which includes one of the masks, like the serial killers in the show used to wear. It also has some other nice pieces here. Here's Joe Carroll's book that he went through all that trouble writing. Still in its original plastic wrapper with his picture on the back. And here is a Following plastic cup with straw. And if that's too fancy for you, we've got a Following paper cup. So if you'd like to help us preserve precious Poe pieces like these and inspire future generations of creative thinkers, why not support the Poe Museum by becoming a member at poemuseum.org. And until next time, thanks for joining us, and we leave you with more gratuitous footage of the Poe Museum cats doing cat stuff.